Hey friends, want to talk to you today about Filmic Pro, which is just an awesome video camera app for the iPhone. And if you're at all interested in doing iPhone video and getting the most out of the video you can get from your iPhone, then I thoroughly recommend this app. So today I'm going to show you a brief overview of the features and tell you why I've just been really enjoying using it. So let's get into this. I've been doing quite a few projects recently with my iPhone, just low budget, social content, stuff like this. And also a music video like this. And it's just amazing that we now live in a time where you can actually do so much with nothing but the camera that's on the phone in your pocket. Now, in order to get the most out of it, I have been using a specific app called Filmic Pro. This app is, okay, it's a few quid for this app, okay? And then once you've got the app, there's a few features that you can actually pay extra for, which means, okay, it's not free, it's not the cheapest thing in the world, but if you're serious about getting the best results out of your video from your iPhone, then I cannot recommend this app enough. So yeah, I'm going to show you some of the features now. I've got my phone set up and I've got my mate Derek here, who's going to help us as a bit of a model. Okay, and yeah, so this, when you open the app, this is really what you're greeted with, and it looks similar to other camera apps, looks similar to the iPhone app, but it has got some amazing features. So first of all, let me talk you through some of the sort of settings that you can change in the app. Okay, so if we click on the cog at the bottom right, it's going to bring up some settings. So straight away you can click into the resolution, and you can see here you can change your aspect ratio for what you're capturing. Okay, so if you want to shoot in a cinematic aspect ratio, then you can put these black bars across. You can see behind it has, if I get rid of the settings there, you can see it's put those there. So it's not actually getting rid of the footage, it's just helping you to frame that footage. For now, I'm going to leave that on 16:9. Then also, you can see you've got your resolution, which gives you way more options than just what your phone camera gives you. So right down from, look, you can take it right down to 540p. I don't know who's filming with 540p now, but you can if you wish to. And I'm using the iPhone 8 Plus, so we can take this up to 4K 2160p. So that's resolution, you can set that. I generally film using the 4K. Even if the final project is not going to be rendered in 4K, I do find that the 4K footage has a nice crisp feel, even when downscaled. So that's what I do. Next is the bit rate. So you've got Apple standard, so that is the bit rate that is used if you're using the iPhone's built-in camera. You can then bump up the bit rate to filmic quality, and you can go one up to filmic extreme. I have found filmic quality to be a nice balance between the quality and your ability to color grade the footage once you get it into the edit, and not making the file sizes enormous. Filmic Extreme does push the file size up, so just bear that in mind. So we're going to leave that on filmic quality. So if we tap anywhere on the screen, that will take us back to the menus, and then we've got our frame rate settings. Again, this gives us way more options than the built-in phone camera, and we can actually choose 24 frames, and we can choose what we want it to play back at as well. So for example, we could say 60 frames, but we could play back at a slower frame rate. I won't go changing that right now. So that would be great if you wanted to record in slow motion and you knew you were only going to ever use it in slow motion, then that would be when that comes in handy. For me though, I like to shoot in 24 frames for standard footage and 24 playback. So that is that. Again, we'll click out of that. You've also got your audio settings. So this is the setting I found to be best. So AAC is the highest quality, I believe, but don't quote me on that. But it gives you the option to actually change, again, the bitrate of the audio you're recording, which is really helpful. And also, if you had microphones plugged in, then it would give you options to change those as well. So going back out of that to the main menu screen, we've then got the device settings. You can see here, you can either save the footage to the camera roll, or you can actually save it within the Filmic Pro app. I tend to prefer saving it to the camera roll. It just works for me. And then you can also, if you've got a second iPhone or an iPad, you can use Filmic Remote app. So a second app. I actually bought Filmic Pro and Filmic Remote as a bundle from the App Store, which saved a few pounds, which means you can actually set up a monitor or a second screen showing you some nice monitoring tools, which I'll get onto. For today, we're just going to leave that as it is. You can also lock the orientation, which means if you sort of are rolling the phone, then it's not going to sort of get confused as the way it is. Nice little feature here as well called stitch footage. What that means is when you press stop and start, it will actually just keep stitching the footage together. So you end up with one clip with all of your different takes in, which I think is can be quite helpful. I tend not to use it. I tend to just leave my clips as separate clips. And that's about everything in there that I really tend to go into. Then we've got some presets. So if you've got your settings that you like using all the time, you can see in here, I've got Will 4K 24. That is my 24 frames per second 4K with all my settings as I like them. And you can add as many presets as you like. So there's a few things. I'm not going to go through everything in here. You've got, if you really want to get into it, you can give things custom titles, which I've never really used, but I can imagine on a really big project that would be quite useful. This does also work very nicely with the DJI Osmo Mobile and the Osmo Mobile 2, so you can actually use it to zoom and start-stop using Filmic Pro, which is a really nice feature. And then what else in here? Oh yeah, really nicely, you can actually turn off the iPhone's built-in stabilization. So this is really good if you are using a mobile gimbal, and sometimes the built-in iPhone optical stabilization can get a little bit confused and you get those like micro jitters. So it's really nice to be able to turn that off. Still not a perfect fix, but that is a whole different video. But it's quite nice. If you know you're going to be shooting on a tripod, you can just turn that stabilization off. You don't need to worry about it. And you've also got guides. So I like to use the guides. Actually, just gives you, your thirds to work with, which can be quite nice for, composing your video. I think that's pretty much everything in there that I tend to use. If we now go back into the camera app, you'll probably notice one thing that's a bit different is you've got these sort of this circle here and this square that you can drag around. And what these are is this is Filmic Pro's way of helping you to it's kind of semi-automatic in a way, which is quite nice. So what the circle is the circle is to help you with your exposure. So as you drag this circle around, it will expose the shot for the right area that you're on. So you can see if I bring it to a darker area in the shot's getting lighter. If I bring it to a lighter area, the shot's getting darker. And so for example, if I wanted to film Derek and I want Derek to be my star today, I want him to be correctly exposed, then I will obviously put that circle over Derek, he's correctly exposed, and if I click it, it goes red, that's now locked the exposure. That is something you cannot do with the iPhone app. It's always automatic exposure, which is helpful sometimes, but a real pain if you're trying to just get something really fixed and consistent. So the next thing is the focus square. So this square is controlling what's in focus. As you move it around, I can move it over to my camera, and you can see that's in focus. Move it across. Now obviously the depth of field on the iPhone is minimal because the sensor is so small, but it is still nice to have that ability. So again, if Derek is the star of the show, then I can lock my focus onto Derek and it's not going to change throughout that shot. So that is quite nice. Also on the right hand side here, you can see this little dial, this little fader, so I can zoom in and zoom out, and that's a smooth action zoom in and zoom out, which is quite nice. On this bottom left of the screen, you can see this little circular device. So if we click that, what that actually does is it takes us into manual mode. And what's nice about this is if you want to get the most cinematic motion, then you want to have the 180-degree rule for your shutter. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, you want to be at 1/48th of a second for your shutter speed. Okay. If you don't know what that means, look it up, have a look, do a bit of research, but don't worry. But yeah, essentially, whatever your frame rate is, double it, and that becomes your shutter speed. So at 24 frames, I can actually set this to be 1/48th of a second. And the reason you do that is because if I go like this, then that's what keeps the motion nice and smooth, the motion blur of those 24 frames that make up the moving image, okay? So what I can do is I can lock the ISO, and then I can adjust my shutter speed to 1/48th, and then I can click that and I can lock that. Then once I've locked the shutter speed, I can then adjust the ISO to the correct exposure that I want for the shot. And obviously you can see you can go way too far, way too dark, but that now means that I have got exactly the shutter speed that I want for the nicest movement from the video. Okay, and again, this is just, you just cannot do this with the built-in iPhone app, okay, the camera app. So that's really nice. Also, you can manually focus, which gives you the ability to actually sort of pull focus, which is really quite good. So if you're trying to get that really artistic effect, or you're trying to achieve something creatively, then you can actually, you know, I could start an interview with Derek with him sort of in soft focus, and then as he starts talking, I could slowly, you know, bring him into focus, which would be maybe a nice thing to do, maybe not. But yeah, really nice that you can do that. And you've actually got control over focus. Again, that's something which you just do not have any control over with the iPhone camera app. You're just in autofocus all the time. It's constantly hunting for something to focus on. And whilst it is absolutely amazing at autofocus, sometimes you just want to lock onto something and know that it's in focus. So that is that. So yeah, so once you've set your shutter speed, you can lock it. And then if we click that device again, you can see when we come back into this screen, our focus and our exposure are locked. Okay, and if I move this circle now, I can move it out of the way. It doesn't matter, it's not changing the settings. That is just, it's locked with what we asked it to. With the focus, again, I can move that wherever I want. It's not going to change, it's locked where I set it. And then if I wanted to, I could just unlock it, put it back onto my point of interest, and there Derek is in focus again, which is nice. Okay, so let's move on. We just looked at a few of the exposure, you know, how you can use manual exposure in the app, which is a really nice feature. But you might be saying, well, how do I know when I'm correctly exposed? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I'm going to come on now to show you some of the tools within Filmic Pro which help you to get your exposure and your focus correct. And both of these tools for focus and exposure are under this A button. So if we click the A button, you will see at the top of the screen we've got these little icons. So we've got zebra. So if we click zebra, what that's going to show us is it's going to show us from an exposure point of view what is overexposed and what is underexposed. So if it's red and white zebra, that means it's slightly overexposed. If it is blue, then it is underexposed. So if I unlock my exposure for a second and I move it around, you can see if I put it here right on Derek, then the white of his nose is slightly overexposed. Just to be clear as well, it doesn't mean it's blown out, it doesn't mean it's ruined, it just means it's slightly over. But you can see how the speaker in the background is blue, so slightly under. So this isn't like foolproof in any way, but it is a nice guide. And you can see if I put this, say, let's try and find an extreme. Yeah, so if I put it down here in this dark corner, then you've got quite a lot of stuff blown out here. If I put it on Derek, then it's sort of, you're losing your shadows a little bit. So yeah, again, it's just a tool to be used. You're looking for a nice balance. And obviously as well, if Derek is the main point of focus in this particular composition, then he's the point I want to be correctly exposed. So I'm going to put that right on him, let the phone decide that it's correctly exposed. Or I can come back into this manual setting and I could say, actually, I'm just going to bring this down a little bit more so that I know Derek is correctly exposed. And then if I click the zebra again, you could say that's actually quite nice. Okay. Again, you might say, actually, I do want to sacrifice the shadows. You might say, I want to sacrifice his nose a little bit and blow his nose out a little bit so that the general scene is lighter. And I don't know if you noticed then, but when I was changing the exposure, the zebras actually automatically come up to help you, which is quite a cool feature. I don't tend to use the zebras that much. I tend to prefer to use the other features that we've got, which I'll move on to now. So the next one we've got, I'm not sure what this is actually called, but it's kind of showing us a different, I guess it's still kind of zebras really, it's just a different way of showing that information. So on this one you can see that if something's blown out, it is red, and if it is underexposed, then it is blue. And again, if I change these settings, you can see, whoa, everything's blown out, or I can take it right down and you can see that a lot of stuff is underexposed. So yeah, it's just a nice tool to help you get your exposure as you want it, okay? And it's always a challenge with any camera getting the exposure right, but yeah, that's just how I sort of use it. So the next one, now this is my favorite. This is my favorite way of getting the exposure right, and this is called false color. And false color completely removes any color from the image. So if you're looking at this now, you're probably thinking, well, this looks completely weird, and you'd be right. But what it's doing is it's showing us a heat map essentially of the exposure. So anything that is red is overexposed, anything that is blue is underexposed, and anything that is green is within the sort of threshold to be deemed as correctly exposed. So if I change my exposure again here, then you can see if I make up that ISO, the whole image pretty much is overexposed. And as I bring it down, you're looking for that nice balance where the majority of the image is correctly exposed. So here, this is probably a bit dark. I would say that with Derek, the way he is sat next to my light, he is going to be a bit overexposed on his nose. Again, if it's red, it doesn't mean it's blown out. It doesn't mean it's ruined. It just means it's sort of slightly overexposed. So I would say, looking at that, that's probably how I'd expose that shot. And if I turn false color off and come back to it, you can see by looking at that image that does look quite pleasant. So these are just tools to be used as a guide, okay? And then finally in these tools, you've got focus assist, which is really nice. And you can see if I start playing with the focus here, it will show you exactly what you want. And I think that the blue and the green are in focus, but the blue is the kind of critical focus, which I think is what you want to be aiming for. So if I bring that like that, so that, there you go. So that's probably got him in focus. So yeah, that is quite nice. And if I turn the auto off, actually, yeah, I was slightly off. So if I move this to there, You see, it doesn't necessarily change that much, does it? This is probably the one bit on Filmic Pro that I'm still a bit jury's out for me on this, because I do find the depth of field on the phone quite limiting anyway. But yeah, it's there as a tool to help you, okay? So I'm just going to show you one more thing really quickly, and then I'm going to wrap this up because I feel like I've been going on forever. And that is, let's turn that off, and that is the white balance. Okay, so again, on the iPhone camera app, you've got no control over the white balance. It is auto, and that means that if I point my phone over here and then start recording and move it over here and the light changes, it can change the white balance. This makes color grading any footage from an iPhone very challenging. So Filmic Pro allows you to actually, firstly, it allows you to set custom white balances, which is amazing. And secondly, it allows you to lock them so you know it's not going to change throughout your shot. You get to that through this little colored icon here, and the auto white balance is actually really good. So I'm not saying don't use auto white balance, but what you can do is you can come in here and you see where it says AWB, which stands for auto white balance. If you decide that is nice and you like the way it is, you just click it, and now that's locked and it will not change. Okay, if it's not locked and I move this around, you can see how it's moving. You see how as I move, the white balance is changing, which means the temperature of the image is changing, and that's a real problem for, you know, trying to do any color correction in post. So even if you like the color balance, you can lock it, or if you don't particularly like how it's looking, you can set your manual color balance. So you can drag around here, or you can use the presets which they provide. So you could say tungsten, sunny, cloudy, fluorescent. These are custom presets that you can save. But for me, generally auto does quite a good job as long as you lock it so that it's not going to change throughout your scene. Okay. The next thing in this tab, so that you see you've got these three sections along the left. The next thing, so we've set our white balance. The next thing is the color profiles. So by default, the iPhone shoots in a natural profile. This is the same as if you've got a DSLR, if you're familiar with using a DSLR, this is like your standard color profile, okay? It's not overly contrasty, it's not overly saturated, but it has got some saturation and some contrast. And that's fine, okay, for most stuff. But if you're not going to do any color grading and you're looking to do something really sort of arty, perhaps, not something I use, but perhaps you don't want to do any editing in post-production, then it's got a dynamic, and you can see there, I don't know if you noticed that when it changed, but it's got much more saturation, much more contrast, and changes the feel of that quite a lot. If I just do that again, go back to the natural, you can see that changes quite a lot and just makes it feel quite a lot richer. Now I say I steer clear of that because I like to color grade my footage in post-production. So that then leads us on to the next two profiles, which I love, which are the flat, which actually the flat profile is a super low contrast, low saturation image. And you can see if I flick between them and you look at Derek, you can see how much pinker he looks in dynamic versus flat. And log is an even more extreme version of that. So if I click on log, you can see that actually on the screen, that image looks awful. But once you get it into your editing software and you do some light color adjustments and color correction, maybe add a LUT if you like using LUTs, then that footage will have retained much more data and much more kind of dynamic range, and will give you much more flexibility in your edit to create the look that you want. Whereas if you shoot in dynamic or natural, there's much less that you can actually do with it after it's been recorded. My preferred profile is the flat. I find the log a little bit too extreme, and you can get a little more noise if you're using that. So for me, I like using the flat profile. So yeah, I'm going to stop there because, as I've already said, I've been going on for a very long time. So I hope you found that useful. That is Filmic Pro. I highly suggest you check it out Filmic Remote is also really cool. It lets you connect a second phone and use that as a monitor, which is great if you're recording yourself or anything like that. So yeah, it's just really completely changed the way I see using a phone to do any kind of filmmaking work, and it's really great. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you found it useful. If you did, give the video a thumbs up. If you liked it, why not subscribe to my channel? I do regular videos about videography, filmmaking, photography, my general journey as I learn all of this stuff. So please subscribe to the channel, join me along for the ride, and other than that, I will see you next time.